Your phone is ringing, you see the name, you know exactly who it is, and you're letting it go to voicemail. Not because you're busy, not because you hate them, but because answering feels like someone just kicked down your door without knocking. While the rest of the world treats phone calls like normal communication, you treat them like home invasions. And according to psychology, you might actually be protecting something everyone else gave up without realizing. Stay with me, because what's happening in your brain when that screen lights up is way more fascinating than you think.
Here's what nobody talks about. The phone call is dying, and the people killing it aren't rude, they're not antisocial, they're not even necessarily anxious. They just figured out something the rest of society hasn't caught up to yet. Calls are non-consensual time theft, and your refusal to answer, that's not avoidance, that's boundary intelligence. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why you'd rather text a novel than speak for 30 seconds, why voicemails make you irrationally angry, and why you're not weird, you're just living in a different temporal reality than everyone else. Let's start with the obvious question everyone asks you. Why don't you just answer? Because here's what they don't understand. A phone call demands immediate attention, immediate response, immediate emotional availability. Right now, this second, drop everything. No warning, no consent, just pure expectation that you'll interrupt your entire existence because they decided it's time to talk. Psychologists call this synchronous communication. Both people have to be present at the exact same moment. And for people with high autonomy needs, that's not just inconvenient, it's a violation. A 2022 study found that people who prefer asynchronous communication, texting, email, voice notes they can listen to later, score significantly higher in something called temporal sovereignty. Translation, they guard their time like it's the most valuable thing they own, because it is. But there's something deeper happening. When your phone rings, your nervous system doesn't register, "Oh, someone wants to chat." It registers threat, genuine physiological threat. Your heart rate spikes, cortisol floods your system. That's your fight or flight response activating. And this isn't traumatic, this is measurable. Research on communication anxiety shows that unexpected phone calls trigger the same stress response as minor physical threats. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, doesn't distinguish between a phone call and a predator. Both are sudden, demanding, and require immediate reaction. People who never answer their phone often have what's called high sensory sensitivity. Their nervous systems are more reactive to unexpected stimuli. The ring itself is aggressive, the vibration is intrusive. The expectation to perform socially on command, that's overwhelming.
And here's where it gets wild. Some of you reading this feel guilty about not answering, like you're doing something wrong. But what if the people calling you are the ones violating an unspoken social contract? Think about it. Would they walk into your house unannounced? Would they demand you stop mid-conversation with someone else to talk to them? Would they interrupt you during a work task, a meal, a moment of peace without asking first? No, that would be rude. But somehow a phone call gets a free pass. Let's talk about the generational divide, because this is crucial. If you're under 35, you probably learned to communicate in a world where you could see the message before responding. Texts gave you time, context, control. You could craft your response, manage your energy, decide when to engage. Phone calls don't offer that. They're emotional ambushes, and your brain learned early, ambushes are dangerous. Older generations, they grew up when phone calls were the only option. Calling was connection. But for you, connection happens on your terms, when you're ready, when you have the emotional bandwidth. That's not entitlement, that's self-preservation. Dr. Sherry Turkle, who studies technology and relationships, found that younger adults experience phone calls as too intense, too demanding, too exposing. There's no editing, no backspace, just real-time vulnerability. And if you're someone who processes internally before speaking, if you need time to formulate thoughts, if you hate being put on the spot, phone calls are psychological warfare. But wait, some of you don't just avoid answering calls, you feel rage when your phone rings, genuine anger. And that's not an overreaction. That's your brain recognizing a pattern. Let me show you why. Every time someone calls instead of texting, they're saying, "My need to talk right now is more important than whatever you're doing." They're prioritizing their convenience over your consent. And your anger? That's your brain protecting your boundaries.
Here's the part that'll make you rethink everything. People who never answer their phone aren't avoiding connection. They're curating it. They're choosing depth over immediacy, quality over convenience. Think about your closest relationships. How many of them were built through phone calls? Probably not many. You connect through long text threads, voice notes you send when inspired, shared memes, planned hangouts. Intentional communication, not random interruptions. Research on communication satisfaction shows that people who prefer asynchronous methods report deeper, more meaningful relationships because their conversations happen when both people are mentally present, not just physically available. Phone calls prioritize speed, but speed isn't the same as substance. A 3-minute call can feel empty. A text conversation over 3 hours can feel profound. You're not avoiding intimacy, you're demanding better intimacy. And let's address the elephant in the room. What if it's an emergency? Okay, valid, but here's the thing. True emergencies are rare. And when they happen, people call multiple times, they text, they leave voicemails. You know the difference between an emergency and someone who just wanted to hear your voice. Your screening isn't callous, it's intelligent pattern recognition. Now, some people hear all this and think, so you're just anxious. And sure, for some people, phone anxiety is rooted in social anxiety disorder. The fear of saying the wrong thing, awkward silences, not knowing how to end the call. That's real, that's valid. But that's not everyone. Some people aren't anxious about phone calls, they're annoyed by them. There's a difference. Anxiety says, I can't handle this. Annoyance says, this is inefficient and disrespectful of my time. Big difference. Psychologists studying communication preferences found that high autonomy individuals, people who value independence and self-direction, experience phone calls as control loss. Someone else decides when the conversation happens, how long it lasts, when it ends. You become reactive instead of proactive. And for people who structure their lives around agency, that's intolerable. Not because they're difficult, because they've built a life where they're the author, not the character.
Here's something wild that nobody talks about. The death of the spontaneous phone call might actually be making us more honest. When you text, you have time to say what you actually mean. When you call, you say what's socially acceptable. You're performing, you're managing. You're not necessarily being real. Let's get into the cultural shift because this is huge. Phone calls used to be special, expensive, limited. You called because it mattered. But now, calls are cheap, unlimited, expected. They lost their weight. Texts became the new baseline, and calls became invasive. It's like how a handwritten letter feels meaningful, but junk mail feels annoying. Same medium, different context. Phone calls aren't special anymore. They're just loud. And here's the generational tension. Older people think not answering is disrespectful. Younger people think calling without warning is disrespectful. Both are right within their own framework, but only one framework respects temporal consent, and that's the framework you're operating in. So pause for a second. Out of everything we've covered, what resonated most? The boundary violation, the nervous system threat, the loss of control, the demand for better intimacy? Drop it in the comments. I want to know which layer hit hardest. Here's the part that changes everything. People who never answer their phone aren't rejecting connection. They're rejecting urgency culture. The idea that everything deserves immediate response, that availability equals care, that spontaneity is more valuable than intention. You're not broken. You're resisting a culture that commodified your attention and called it connection. You're demanding that people respect your time enough to ask before taking it. And honestly, that's not antisocial. That's revolutionary. You're drawing a line in a world that erased all lines. You're saying, I exist beyond your immediate needs.
So what's the psychology of people who never answer their phone? It's boundaries, it's nervous system protection, it's temporal sovereignty, it's the death of performative availability, it's the refusal to let someone else's timeline hijack yours. It's not fear, it's not rudeness, it's not even anxiety necessarily. It's autonomy, pure, unapologetic autonomy. And in a world that demands you be accessible 24/7, that's the most radical thing you can protect. Next time someone complains that you never answer, maybe don't apologize. Maybe just say,
I value our conversation too much to have it as an interruption. See how they react. And if you found this validating, and if you want to support deep psychology content like this, consider becoming a channel member. It genuinely keeps these videos coming, and I appreciate you more than you know. Now go silence that ringer with pride.